Hello everyone, my name is Elaine and I want to welcome you to my Unison League Rook's Guide Part 2. This will help you grow accustomed to the game and give you some advice on the Rook class. Since I discussed the first ring in the first part of my guide, I'm going to spend this video discussing the Rook class's second ring using the same format as in my first video. Let's get right into it with the Rook's second ring, the Bastion. The first ability in the Bastion's ring is Silver Fortress, which has a cooldown of 10 seconds and a cost of 15. It is usable when a sword is equipped as your main weapon. Targets one enemy with an ability power of 130. Deals physical damage 2 times using both physical and magical defense. It has an added effect. It reduces the target's HP recovery gains by 20% for 10 seconds. It has a combo effect. When used after Protection of Faith, it has an ability power of 140, a 10-point increase over the non-combo version. Deals physical damage to one enemy 2 times using both physical and magical defense. It has an added effect. It reduces the target's HP recovery gains by 30% for 10 seconds, a 10% increase over the non-combo version. This ability feels a tad lackluster to me. First, it has a lower median cooldown and median cost. It has a modest ability power, which is tempered by its lack of penetrating capabilities, but it hits twice. Its added effect isn't too exciting. It reduces the target's HP recovery gains for 10 seconds. While this makes it easier to pick them off since they can't heal as effectively, the effect itself doesn't last very long and isn't very grand. Finally, although the combo effect helps to improve the ability overall, it isn't enough to make me change my opinion. This ability is outshone by many of the others available to you. Then came Spirit Territory, which has a cooldown of 10 seconds and a cost of 15. It is usable when a book is equipped as your main weapon. Targets one enemy with an ability power of 130 and deals magic damage 2 times using both magical and physical defense. It has an added effect. It increases the target's cooldown times by 10% for 10 seconds. It has a combo effect. When used after Balance of Life, its ability power is 140, a 10-point increase over the non-combo version. And it deals magic damage to one enemy 2 times using both physical and magical defense. It has an added effect. It increases the target's cooldown times by 20% for 10 seconds, a 10% increase over the non-combo version. Spirit Territory shares many similarities with the other main weapon slot exclusive ability available to the Rook, Silver Fortress. They both have 10-second cooldowns, a cost of 15, and an ability power of 130 that can be raised to 140 when used in combination with Balance of Life. They both lack penetrating abilities to bolster their damage output potential and deal damage twice to their target. Spirit Territory does magic damage while Silver Fortress deals physical damage. Their added effects are really what differentiates them from one another. Spirit Territory's added effect is also pretty meh in my opinion. Its base added effect increases the target's cooldown times by 10% for 10 seconds, while its combination added effect increases the target's cooldown times by 20% for 10 seconds. This really isn't much to speak of. If your opponent has an ability with a 10-second cooldown, it will add an additional second if not used in combination with Balance of Life, and 2 seconds if it is used in combination with Balance of Life. While this may slow your opponent down a bit, I don't feel like the change is profound enough to make the ability particularly worthwhile, since most people don't carry abilities with particularly long cooldowns, and if they do, they tend to only carry 1 or 2, which makes it difficult to make the most out of Spirit Territory. Next up is Soul Judgment, which has a cooldown of 40 seconds and a cost of 15. Targets all enemies and applies Judgment. Judgment applies all debuffs on your character to the target or targets, complete with their current effect values and time remaining. It has an added effect, which removes all debuffs from your character. This ability seems alright at first glance, but is really a steaming pile of shite. First off, this ability's cooldown is ridiculous, 40 seconds. Its cost is a moderate 15, which isn't too egregious, but also isn't as low as it should be. This ability's main problems are similar to White Charms, but with more negativity because Soul Judgment works with debuffs as opposed to buffs. Anyway, Soul Judgment is only useful if you are currently debuffed, which isn't too difficult a condition to achieve. You could get them from monster effects and more. The problem with this ability lies predominantly in the second half of its description, which explains how Judgment works. Judgment applies all debuffs on your character to the target or targets, complete with their current effect values and time remaining. Debuffs include things like stat reduction and status ailment resistance reduction. Plus, the ability's effects exclude special status debuffs like break and jealousy. So you can't even inflict the worst punishments possible on your enemies, which I imagine was done for balancing purposes, but is still a bit of a letdown, and kind of unnecessary when you consider just how weak this ability truly is. The latter portion of Judgment's description explains that the debuffs are inflicted with their current effect values and time remaining. This means that if you don't time your use of Soul Judgment properly, you can wind up punishing your enemy or enemies for a grand total of a handful of seconds or less. In addition, this ability's usefulness corresponds to how debuffed you are. To make the most out of it, you have to be in pretty bad shape. Passing a single debuff or 2 onto your enemy or enemies isn't going to be as beneficial to you and your teammates as passing on a multitude of them. But is it worth the wait to make the most out of this ability? Is it worth simply allowing yourself to be debuffed over and over again for the momentary glory of playing an Uno reverse card as you stick out your tongue and pass on your pain to your opponent or opponents? I doubt it. Furthermore, debuffs similar to regular buffs have a cap, which further compounds the weakness of this ability. Finally, debuffs can be cleared by a host of different abilities such as Great Arc Heal and Cleanse Healing, by monster effects, etc. Soul Judgment's added effect isn't too helpful either, for as I've mentioned previously, it's not particularly hard to clear debuffs. You can do it with a number of things such as player and monster abilities. In conclusion, Soul Judgment is a steaming pile of shite because its cooldown is too darn high, because there's a cap on what you can pass on, because you can't pass on special debuffs, because debuffs are easily countered by means such as time and abilities, and because its added effect is redundant, something a teammate or monster is capable of doing for you if time doesn't get to it first. Up next is Sword of Innocence, which has a cooldown of 20 seconds and a cost of 25. It is usable when your character's HP is below 70%. It targets a random enemy with an ability power of 100. It deals physical damage 5 times and magic damage 5 times. This one is a bit of a mixed bag for me, leaning towards spilling over into a pile of dog shite. First, the cost and cooldown for this ability are a tad high. I'm also not fond of the fact that you can only use it once you've lost a certain amount of HP, because if you're not being hit, not taking damage, or simply not taking enough damage to fall below this threshold, which is possible when you're tanky, have a good healer, etc., then Sword of Innocence is useless because you can't use it at all. With that being said, there are ways to manipulate the game in your favor. For example, you could use Devoted Sacrifice and hope for the best. The problem with this, again, is that you may not take enough damage to be able to use Sword of Innocence, or you could take so much that you wind up in a bad place. Since Sword of Innocence doesn't recover any of your HP and requires you to have lost a good deal of your HP in order to use, it leaves the Rook rather vulnerable and susceptible to an untimely demise, which makes me uneasy considering a Rook's position and role within a team. Furthermore, timing becomes really important here. You could fall within the window of use after using an ability such as Devoted Sacrifice, but then be unable to use Sword of Innocence because you're in the process of using another ability and your friendly neighborhood cleric has done you a solid and saved your behind. Although this ability hits a whopping 10 times total, which I love, I don't like its fairly low ability power, lack of penetrating abilities, which limits its damage output potential, and the fact that it targets a random enemy. Specifically because there's usually someone on the opposite side you need to take out, and this ability probably won't pick that person or monster because Unison League is a massive troll. In sum, I would personally avoid this ability like the plague because there are too many variables that you can't account for, which could make its use impossible, difficult, and or just plain risky. Next up is Noble Conviction, which has a cooldown of 40 seconds and a cost of 0. It consumes 40% of your max HP and recovers 30 cost. It removes status ailments and debuffs. It cannot be used when you have less than 40% of your max HP. This is a cost recovery ability similar to a Mage's Ether Exchange or Fanatic Soul. It's better than EE in the sense that it has the same base cost and cooldown but recovers 30 cost as opposed to Ether Exchange's 20. Although Noble Conviction consumes 40% of your max HP as opposed to EE's 30%. Although Rooks are far tankier than the average mage and tend to have more HP, so I suppose that's okay. Noble Conviction also has a secondary aspect to its ability, which EE lacks. Noble Conviction is definitely more on par with Fanatic Soul's power level. They have the same cost and cooldown, consume similar amounts of HP. Noble Conviction consumes 40% of your max HP, whereas Fanatic Soul consumes 30% of your max HP. However, base Noble Conviction recovers 5 more cost than Fanatic Soul's base, 30 cost to 25 cost. Their secondary ability aspects put them on par with one another, Fanatic Soul increasing the critical damage ability power of all allies by 20 for 40 seconds, while Noble Conviction removes both status ailments and debuffs from your person. So Fanatic Soul helps with your team's damage output potential, whereas Noble Conviction aids in your survival, which will hopefully allow you to perform admirably as a tank and keep your team safe. While both are beneficial for different reasons, you can't use Fanatic Soul as a Rook, so Noble Conviction is your best option. It is a good option when one considers how useful cost is in the game, since cost allows you to use more abilities, which you could use to heal yourself and your allies, spam utilities to aid your team in their survival, use attacks to help deal damage, etc. Then came Immortal Heart, which has a cooldown of 60 seconds and a cost of 25. It targets the self and applies Immortal. Your HP cannot be reduced below 1 and restores 60% of your max HP when the effect ends, for 7 seconds. This ability feels like an updated Devoted Sacrifice to me, although there are several striking differences between the two abilities. First, Immortal Heart has a much higher cost and cooldown than Devoted Sacrifice, 60 seconds to 20 seconds, and 25 to 15 cost. Second, Devoted Sacrifice lasts for 5 seconds as opposed to Immortal Heart's 7 and forces you to take on the damage of your allies as though it were your own. You cannot have your HP reduced to 0 while this ability is in effect. Immortal Heart, on the other hand, simply does not allow your damage to fall below 1. It does not force you to take on your allies' damage, however. Devoted Sacrifice does not auto-heal you like Immortal Heart does on the completion of its effect, forcing you to rely on other means of recovering the HP you lost while the ability was in effect. Immortal Heart, however, heals 60% of your max HP when its effect ends. So I would argue that Devoted Sacrifice is better for players who have reliable means of recovering the HP after use and play a larger role in keeping their team alive, whereas Immortal Heart is better for those who are more of a DPS support character than a true tank and do not have a reliable means of HP recovery. Even so, I think Devoted Sacrifice is better overall because of its ability to protect one's other teammates, who are probably fairly squishy, especially when one considers how many options a Rook has of recovering their HP at their disposal. For example, a Cleric's Mend, or Rook's own Protection of Faith, etc. Next up is Improved Heal, which has a cooldown of 18 seconds and a cost of 20. Targets one ally on their adjacent allies, a max of 3 allies. It increases HP recovery effects by 50% for 5 seconds. It has an added effect. With a healing ability power of 40, it heals the HP of the targets. This ability's cost and cooldown feel a little high to me. While I appreciate how it has an AoE affecting a max of 3 players total, its initial effect, which increases HP recovery effects by 50% for 5 seconds, is far too short to be truly beneficial. Since one has to wade through ability animations, you're probably going to only receive the benefit from this ability and perhaps one more that you'd cast. If you have a cleric or clerics on your team, it's possible that they'd use an ability that would allow you to take advantage of the first half of Improved Heal's effects. The same would be the case of an archer's World Tree's Blessing or similar. But again, because the duration of this effect is so short, it'd be difficult to get the most out of it, especially when you consider how much the average cleric can heal with the single use of one of their abilities. They probably don't need the assistance of an ability such as this to fully heal their teammates back up to full health if they made it out of noob territory. The more interesting aspect of Improved Heal's ability lies in the fact that it heals the HP of its targets with an ability power of 40, assuming they aren't cursed or something, since Improved Heal cannot clear status ailments. It will be receiving a slight boost from the first part of Improved Heal's ability, but I don't feel as though it's enough to warrant this ability's use when we consider how low a Rook's magical attack is bound to be, which plays a large role in determining one's healing capacity, how low Improved Heal's ability power is, and the average Rook's complete lack of weapons that assist with healing capabilities. At the end of the day, if you absolutely need a healing ability in your set, you're probably better off incorporating some combination of Protection of Faith and a basic cleric healing ability such as Mend, since Mend has a lower cooldown, heals all of your allies as opposed to a max of 3 allies, and can recover up to a max of 25% of max HP for all of your allies when fully enchanted, allowing you to quit worrying about your stats capabilities and just keep people alive. Last but not least is Improved Mend, which has a cooldown of 60 seconds and a cost of 20. It targets all allies and recovers 70% of their max HP. It has an added effect. It increases your character's cost recovery speed by 540 seconds. This ability is wonderful and a truly updated and largely improved version of Mend. It heals 70% of your allies' max HP as opposed to a mere 10%, 25% when Mend is fully enchanted. But Improved Mend's cooldown is 4 times as long, 60 seconds as opposed to 15 seconds. Furthermore, regular Mend has no cost, whereas Improved Mend costs 20 to use. Regular Mend lacks a secondary portion to its ability power, which I feel begins to even out these two abilities. You see, Improved Mend has an added effect. It increases your character's cost recovery speed by 5 for 40 seconds. This is truly beneficial as cost is an essential part of the game. It allows you to use attacks to take down your enemies, heal your allies, or cast utilities and other support skills that can aid your team in various ways. The only real complaint I have for Improved Mend are its high cost and cooldown. So ultimately, the decision to use Mend or Improved Mend, or neither if you'd prefer, boils down to how quickly you need to spam a healing ability. If you find that you run out of cost a lot in your set and you don't have a reliable healer or means of recovering your own HP, you probably want to go with Mend since its casting requirements are so much lower than those of Improved Mends. However, if you don't need support in the healing department as consistently and can truly afford both the cost and weight between the times in which Improved Mend can be cast, then it'd make a wonderful addition to your ability lineup. And that concludes my Unison League Rook's Guide Part 2. I hope you found my guide helpful and feel better prepared to play Unison League. I wish you all the best of luck and thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe and hit that bell so you know what's up, and leave a comment if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help and we'll be adding more class guides over time to continue to expand your breadth of knowledge. Happy gaming, I hope you all have a wonderful day and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye guys!